We are recording technology. It is such an amazing thing. It compels us to do all sorts of absurd things, trying to outthink the thinkers at Microsoft, etc. How are you this morning, Barrett?
I'm doing good, Chris. As I mentioned to you, I was enjoying looking at the frost outside this morning. So definitely a little hint of winter in the air as we head deeper into fall here.
Yes, it is without a doubt escalating very rapidly. There was mumblings on the radio yesterday about the possibility of snow in the next 3 days. Not anything significant, but a little flurry showing up, and that always tightens everybody's posterior up as winter arrives, and we have to become much more mindful of wrapping ourselves up in multiple layers of swaddling clothes.
I've always liked swaddling clothes. I don't know if I know exactly what it is, but it sounds so nice.
Well, I think it's primarily discarded rags, that you pick up along life's journey. And so if you have been one of those harvester gatherer kind of people, you've probably got swaddling things laying around in the house.
Oh, well, there we go. I'm sure I've got some of that around here.
And it's nice when you have somebody who knits things for you, knits really thick, heavy muffins and mufflers. I mean, not muffins. You bake the muffins, you knit the mufflers. But scarves and all that sort of thing, it's the time to start dragging that stuff out of its storage containers and getting ready for winter's adventure.
That's true. That's true. And we're going to knit some pieces of talk together here today, too, about the Course in Miracles and the Song of Prayer pamphlet, which we've been reading for the last few months, just kind of going paragraph by paragraph through it. And we're near the end. So we're in the last section, last dozen or so paragraphs here that we were reading in this section. And it's just a beautiful section, as we talked about last week. It's really Jesus coming and bringing all the themes he's introduced in this whole pamphlet together to help us to see that the goal of all this work, the goal of all the forgiveness and the prayer and the healing is an experience of God's love. And it really is that simple. It really is that joyful. And we don't need to make it more complicated or hard than that. And I think that this section is really helping us to see that when we let go of all the ideas of false healing, that we come into the real state of healing. And this paragraph that we're actually reading next is sort of a nice synthesis of the three different sections we've been reading on prayer, forgiveness, and healing. He starts off by saying, "You first forgive, then pray, and you are healed. Your prayer has risen up and called to God, who hears and answers. You have understood that you forgive and pray but for yourself. And in this understanding, you are healed. In prayer, you have united with your source and understood that you have never left. This level cannot be attained until there is no hatred in your heart and no desire to attack the Son of God." So he's talking here about this sense of inner purification, which is the process that we go through of looking at all these fears, judgments, angers, bitternesses within ourselves, bringing them forward, and ultimately seeing that they are substanceless, that there's nothing really to them. And as we do that, we find that we are simply in that state of love and joy. So that's a pretty beautiful thing, and I think it's why we're doing this work. It's why each of us get up in the day, and if we sit down with the workbook or we read a little bit from the Course, that this is the reason why we do that, so that we can come into knowing the wholeness of God's love.
And I think equally important, the wholeness of God's creation. I think that, this once again puts a huge emphasis on the fact that, number one, everybody is the Son of God, as it is written in this passage. Everyone is the creation. There is no other creation. God created man in God's image. So God created God. And we really have to get to the point where we can humble the ego so that we aren't engaging in this constant flow of critical judgment. I think that's one of the things that at some point we all who are on the journey have to really address, is that inclination to like this person and not really care for that person and absolutely despise this other person. So we have to neutralize that process in our brain, because the brain is trainable, and that could become some sort of lyric for a song, I think. But nonetheless, the brain is inclined to do that, and we have to step up and give a little bit of structure to the brain and say, no, we don't do this. We don't judge. We accept everybody as we accept ourselves, which takes us back to the golden rule that Jesus presented to us 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, and it always comes back to that, right? That there's a choice within, and ultimately that choice is always within the mind. Jesus says in the Course that the power of choice is the one remaining power that we have left to ourselves here in this world of time and space. It's not really about what we do here in this world, the physical world, but it's always about how we do it. Are we doing it with the perspective of love and kindness and compassion? Or are we doing the things in our life that we're doing from a perspective of fear and antagonism and sense of lack and scarcity? Those are always an indicator that we're sort of on the ego's track. And like you said, once we get on that train, we're what's that, highway to hell? Let's turn this train around.
Yes, and turn it into the Christmas train. Or what was that Christmas train? The Polar Express. That might be. Yeah. That might be where we're headed invariably anyway. So, going on with this next paragraph, we have, never forget this. It is you who are God's son. And, that is a very powerful point. We're not talking about Jesus over in the corner handing out Christmas gifts to those of us who are unworthy. We're talking about each one of us is, in fact, the expression, the creation of God. And as you choose to be to him, so are you to yourself, and God to you. Nor will your judgment fail to reach to God, for you will give the role to him you see in his creation. So we reinvent God by what we are perceiving in those around us. So whoever it is that you hate, you're going to have to make some struggle here to turn that hate around and perceive the presence of God in that individual. Do not choose amiss, or you will think that it is you who are the creator in his place, and he is then no longer cause, but only an effect. Now healing is impossible, for he is blamed for your deception and your guilt. He who loves becomes the source of fear, for only fear can now be justified. Vengeance is his great destroyer, death, and sickness, suffering, and grievous loss become the lot of everyone on earth, which he abandoned to the devil's care, swearing he will deliver it no more. So whenever we try to usurp the authority of God, that really is what it almost instantaneously turns into being. We have we have taken God out of that position of being in control of the universe and tried to impose our authority, and in the process have righteous judgment and condemnation for those that don't measure up to our lofty standards. So it gets uglier and uglier and uglier. And this is the brilliance of A Course in Miracles, is it's so subtle and simple and so overlooked by 99.9% of the people on the planet, because everybody is in that ego defense mode. And that's where those of us who are picking up the Course and investing some time in it each day have the authority and the power given to us to turn that around by looking at everybody that we would have a judgment against and pointing out, oh, look at that idiot and his ego. We have to step back from that and look in the mirror more frequently and get that ego under control. And, you know, the only way to do that really is not by battling the ego, but by surrendering to the Christ. So we're at a very powerful point in this pamphlet on the whole concept of prayer, because it really now is crystallizing the last 5 or 6 weeks of discussion that we have had around this topic. And we're seeing the truth of what prayer actually is and the power that is placed in our hands. And that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and it always comes back to us. What you were sharing just now here, Chris, reminded me of the last section in the text, which is the choice to choose once again, right? But we can always choose once again, no matter how much we're invested in hatred, no matter how much we're invested in suffering. And you raised a really good point too, Chris, which is that people are very good at spotting the ego in someone else, right? So, of course, the Miracle students are great at noticing other people's ego. But that will not bring you peace, right? Pointing out someone else's ego problem will not bring you happiness. It will not cleanse your inner mirror of the spots of guilt and shame. The only way to do that is to really release all of the, all of your own issues. So much more important than noticing when other people are in their ego is noticing when you are in your ego. When each of us can catch ourselves and say, hey, oh yeah, I was making a choice for fear right there. And then walk through the forgiveness process where we realize we were projecting our own inner pain and guilt out onto someone else. And then we recall it and then we say, I'm not guilty either, because nothing has really happened, because this whole world is actually a dream. And then turning all of that over to the Holy Spirit. Again, that's the process we go through again and again and again, with every smudge of fear within our mind, with every blot of anger, guilt, shame, sadness that we experience. We just keep stepping through this. And over time, we come into a state of happiness and of peace, because we just have less of that old garbage within ourselves. And as Jesus is saying in this paragraph, whenever we're in the ego, we're in the ego. It's all or nothing. That last sentence is pretty intense. And sickness, suffering, and grievous loss become the lot of everyone on earth, which he abandoned to the devil's care, swearing he will deliver it no more. So it's like, whew, that's the world when we're coming from this place of separation. And the work with the Course is not to deny these dark feelings, to deny the ego's way of looking at the world. It's actually to see it all fully, and then to see that there's nothing really there. And that becomes the work that we do with every problem we have in our life, everything that comes up for us on each and every day.
Absolutely. Yes. When you are witnessing the ego in somebody else, that means that you're residing in the ego yourself. And you really have to take that as the bottom line standard. The only way you can witness the ego anywhere is by viewing it through the lens of your own ego. So, and if you really want, to accelerate your growth, spend a lot of time on Facebook, because You will undoubtedly encounter enough stuff in the period of 1 hour or less to cause you to go back to radical forgiveness.
Yeah, yeah. We have enough opportunities for forgiveness that, you know, whatever we do in our life, wherever we look, we're going to find more of them. Uh, you know, it's basically the way we have it set up, that if there's any sort of guilt in our mind, we're going to find a way to project it out onto the world. We're going to find some scapegoat for our anger, for our fear, for our feeling like a victim. And we just start getting better at catching ourselves and saying, you know, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to do that. And I think this next paragraph here actually kind of fits right with this thought. He says, "Come unto me, my children, once again, without such twisted thoughts upon your hearts. You still are holy with the holiness which fathered you in perfect sinlessness, and still surrounds you with the arms of peace. Dream now of healing. Then arise and lay all dreaming down forever. You are he your Father loves, who never left his home, nor wandered in a savage world with feet that bleed and with a heavy heart made hard against the love that is the truth in you. Give all your dreams to Christ, and let him be your guide to healing, leading you in prayer beyond the sorry reaches of the world." It's beautiful. And it's pointing us to what we need to do, which is just continue to give all of our pain and suffering over to Jesus or Holy Spirit, to just keep asking them for help with all of our pain. And as we keep doing that, as we consistently practice that, we do get the results. And the results are freedom from that suffering, freedom from the pain. And it's a beautiful gift.
As you were reading that the first few words, "Come unto me, my children," my imagery that came to mind around that was the Christ of the Andes, that magnificent statue over Rio de Janeiro with the Christ with the arms spread wide. And, you know, that is a beautiful, beautiful idea of Christ embracing the entire planet. I think that that was one of the most brilliant placements for a statue of that sort anywhere in the world. And it really epitomizes a lot of what we're reading here in this particular passage.
Yeah, that is a beautiful symbol where he kind of stands above, and it's like he's above the world watching over it, that statue. And that's a great idea for what we're trying to achieve ourselves as we step more fully into the Christ that we are. As we go above the battleground, we can still see the world, we can still interact on a physical level with everything that's happening here, but we just stop taking it so seriously because we realize there's nothing real here. And that's sort of a subtle but also important point, because when we start to have this perspective, we can't really be hurt by the things that happen here. It actually reminds me of a metaphor that Ken Wapnick sometimes would use in talking about the challenges we feel in this world. He said it's like we're an adult crouching down in a sandbox, and you know the other kids are kicking sand in our face or something. Well, what are we supposed to do? Well, it's not kick sand back in these kids' face. It's to remember that we are an adult and to stand up. And if we stand up in the sandbox, the kids might still be kicking sand at us, but it just hits our legs. It doesn't bother us. We can respond appropriately and still deal with what's happening, but in a way that is beyond really feeling hurt by what happens here. So I just love that image, and it helps me a lot when I'm feeling like sand is being kicked my way in the sandbox here.
And it's interesting how we script all of these different things from that ego level to really create ire. We manage to bring scenarios into our lives that are going to be like a great big fat worm dangling on a hook in front of a 5-pound trout. It's that you're going to go for the worm, regardless of whether or not there's a hook in it. And there's always, always, always a hook in it. So we really have to be on guard and looking at where these attack thoughts are coming from. And as we trace them back, eventually we get to the point where we realize, oh, those are my attack thoughts attacking me. And that really sucks.
Yeah, when we really get that there's just one of us here, and that every judgment, every attack that we have of anyone is always us coming back to us. We start to get better at saying, I don't want to do that. I don't want to attack myself. I don't want to judge myself for this. And all of a sudden we start to kind of forbear a little. We say, maybe there's another way here. And that thought is so helpful because, the ego wants to judge right away, and sort of like often feels like an impulse. It feels like it's just an automatic thing. But what we don't always see is that before that automatic, there is a little space. And if we can just come to our mind, come to maybe even take a breath before the reaction, we can realize, oh, that's not an automatic thing. It's actually a choice I'm making. And I want to choose something better. I want to choose something that's loving and kind. And that's again what our work is. We keep practicing that. And as Jesus says, miracles are habits. So the more we do this, the more quickly we can catch ourselves before we start taking that highway to hell.
Yes, and that is an ugly descent in every occasion. Going forward here, it says, he comes for me and speaks my word to you. I would recall my weary son to me from dreams of malice to the sweet embrace of everlasting love and perfect peace. My arms are open to the son I love, who does not understand that he is healed, and that his prayers have never ceased to sing his joyful thanks in unison with all of creation in the holiness of love. Be still an instant. Underneath the sounds of harsh and bitter striving and defeat, there is a voice that speaks to you of me. Hear this an instant and you will be healed. Hear this an instant and you have been saved. And that, once again, really addresses that imagery of the acceptance, like the statue in Brazil. There is this constant state of acceptance from God and from the Christ. And the only thing that is blocking our recognition of that is our own ego. It's such a total and complete acceptance that once you step into that state of grace, you realize, how could I ever have thought of myself as being unworthy? And how could I ever have had any kind of a desire to lash out at anybody that I've ever known? So it really creates a new foundation for a lifestyle that is a contribution to all of humanity rather than an attack on all of humanity. And I think that's, that's that gentle shift of a state of awareness out of the idea of being a body that needs to be defended and into the recognition that I am all creation and there is nothing that can in any way attack or offend me.
Yeah. Yeah, and as we step out of that old way of thinking, we really do start to see that it was madness, literally madness, to believe that we could be separate, to believe that we could suffer, to believe that we could experience death. All these thoughts are actually, as Jesus says very clearly, they are insane. And another way to put it is that we are hallucinating all of this. Jesus really clearly says, what if you realized that all of this world that you're experiencing is a hallucination? I mean, he basically saying, would you be so upset if you realized everything that's happening here is not really happening? That you're still safe at home in heaven and you never left? Like, that actually sounds like pretty good news to me.
Yes, although it is the option that we are least inclined to take. You know, it's we do like to entertain that idea of being our own unique self. And look at what I have crafted here. I see a lot of this on social media right now about you should define yourself. You are here to create yourself, and I think that can take you down a rocky road if you're not real cautious about how you apply that idea.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And there's so many people who have worked with these sort of, a law of attraction kind of thoughts and how to manifest the life you want. And it's amazing how many people I know who've used these concepts. And as they come into the concepts of the course, they realize, well, a lot of these people, they've gotten what they wanted, right? You know, they got the house on the ocean, they got the car, they got the wife, they got the life that they thought was it. And then they realized that wasn't it. I mean, how many other people try these techniques and they don't get it, and then they just beat themselves up for not doing it right or whatever it is. But in neither case is it it. You know, nothing in this world is the answer. Your eternal truth is the answer. That's why Jesus says elsewhere, he says, you know, there are questions that this course will not answer. And he says, do not seek for the answers, because the answer is not an idea. The answer is an experience. When you have that experience of your connection to God, the questions fall away. There's no need to question what is always there. It's only in our lack consciousness that we actually have a question. We actually have a need for something, because our deeper state is completely complete. It never has had a want of anything. And we're coming into that more and more as we work with these concepts. And as you know, this beautiful paragraph, he says, be still an instant. You know, underneath the harsh and bitter striving is a voice that speaks to you. Listen for that voice. Listen for that connection to your truth within. It is there, even if you don't think it is. Even if you think, oh, somehow I'm broken, I don't have access to this. It's just a layer of false thinking that says that. And underneath that false thinking is your connection to the light. So don't doubt that it's there for you. It's there for everyone. And eventually all of us are going to come into experience of that. That's inevitable too, because the awakening to God's truth is already over. We've already completed the journey, even though it seems like it's still unfolding. So just know that happy news that you can't miss the mark, because in truth you're already home in your oneness with God.
That's very true. And that, you know, recalls that one statement by Jesus, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things shall be added unto you. And that really is the trick, is to realize that once you feel and have established the reality of your connection to the divine, then everything that you need is at your fingertips. It arrives in an absolutely perfect divine timing. And that is just simply because your mind has been put at ease. Your mind has finally arrived at a place where it will manifest everything that you need. You know, right now, God is not withholding anything from us, but the ego is very good at setting up conditions and circumstances where we're always searching for something. So the only withholding that is done is by us and from us. So that's a nasty little dark side of the ego that we really have to be cautious about.
Yeah. And I know we're kind of running near the end of our time. So speaking of searching, if people are searching for an opportunity to see us in the flesh, there's one of those coming up pretty soon here. Chris and I and 3 other course teachers here in the Chicago area are all joining for an afternoon with a Course in Miracles called Exploring the Course. And that's Sunday, November 5th from 1 to 5 p.m. in Glenview. More details on that are at my website, barretthadeen.com, or Chris's great website, themiraclewithin.org, which has a copious amount of resources for anyone looking to explore these concepts of the Course more. I can't recommend your website enough. It is so good.
Well, thank you. It was an effort of joy. So, and I think that's really the key whenever we're doing that which brings us joy. We're generally looped into the Christ one way or another. Jesus is right there at our side giving us instruction. And I think when we all convene in November, it's going to be an amazing experience, because I think Jesus is going to be handing out trick-or-treat goodies, leftovers from Halloween.
Ooh.
And yeah, so it's going to be amazing. People should get there and bring their trick-or-treat bags.
All right, well, I can't wait now. This is getting more and more exciting.
Well, we will be back. Let's see. Next week, you're not going to be around. Is that correct? I can't remember.
Next week I will. The week after, I'll be out of town.
Okay, so we will be available next week in 7 days.
Yeah, we'll finish up this beautiful pamphlet, actually. A few more paragraphs to go.
Wonderful. Well, it was great chatting with you, Barrett. And everybody get out there and share the love. Pass the love around. That's all you need to do. There's no other effort. Just that one thing, and it'll work for you.
Yeah, very beautiful day, Chris. Always a pleasure to be with you here. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you soon, too. So yeah, everyone have a happy Halloween, and we'll talk to you guys all in November.
Bye.
Bye.